Hello, welcome to British English with Alexandre. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world now. Today we're gonna be talking about another unit of British grammar where basically we're going to be talking about some fundamental issues in terms of construction of sentences in English. But before anything else, please, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel so that we can help English learners all over the world to improve their English and reaching their fluency. Please subscribe to the channel, share the content, and like it also. Okay, without any further ado, let's get started with the lesson. This is unit 29 of our series. Basically, we're gonna be talking about verb and its object. In that case, in relation to verb plus two objects or objects. Okay, this is section A. For example, we're gonna be talking about the relation or the position of the objects in terms of the relation to the verb. So here we have some verbs can be followed by two objects. Usually the first object, the indirect object, IO, is a person or group of people, and the second object, the direct or the direct object, DO, is a thing. For example, can you bring me some milk? Can you bring me some milk? If you bring me, you bring to me or for me some milk. Can you bring me some milk? Can you bring me some milk? Me is the IO, that is the indirect object. Can you bring some milk for me, or can you bring me some milk from the shops? So we've got, can you bring me, the indirect object or object, some milk, direct object, from the shops. Can you bring me some milk from the shops? Can you bring me what? Some milk. From what? From the shops. Another example. He made himself a cup of coffee. He made himself what? He made himself a cup of coffee. He made himself, IO, to him, indirect object, a cup of coffee, direct object. So notice that we always have the, or at least most times, we've got the IO, the indirect or indirect object, and the DO, the direct object. Okay, moving on. Here we go. Many verbs that can have two objects may also be used with a DO, direct object or object. Only, for example, only one time, for example, I read a story. It's complete, so it has only one object. With the many verbs that can have two objects, it is possible to reverse the order of the objects. If we put for or ter before the IO, the indirect object, this is then called a prepositional object. Compare. I built my daughter a doll's house. You built what? I built my daughter a doll's house. And I built a doll's house for my daughter. I built a doll's house for my daughter. So we reverse the order between direct object and indirect object. Another example, can you pass me that bandit? Can you pass me that bandit? Can you pass me what? That bandit. Or you might also say, can you pass that bandit to me? Can you pass that bandit to me? So we reverse the order in terms of direct object and indirect object. We might also use that pattern reversing the order of the objects with those verbs. For example, other verbs with for plus object: book, buy, catch, choose, cook, fetch, find, get, make, order, pour, save. And other verbs with to plus object we might use with the verbs award, to give, to concede, give, hand, land, offer, owe, show, teach, tell, and throw. Okay, moving on. We often use this pattern if we want to focus particular attention on the object after for or /to. We also use it if the IO, the indirect object or object, is a lot longer than the DO, direct object. For example, Jasmine taught music to a large number of children at the school. So notice that Jasmine taught is the music, direct object, and to a large number of children at the school. So notice the extent of the indirect object. It's too longer. It's far larger, far too bigger than the minuscule direct object. In that case, the order has to be direct object first and indirect object at the end. Jasmine taught music to a large number of children at the school. Jasmine taught what to a large number of children at the school? Music. Yeah. Jasmine taught music to what? To a large number of children at the school. Okay, if the DO is a pronoun, pay attention to this particular aspect. A pattern with DO plus preposition plus IO is usual. Patterns without a preposition are avoided because they are considered to be bad style, but it's not much important. The most important is, in that example, for example, I gave them to Isa. I gave them to Isa. So notice that the direct object is a pronoun. In that case, it always comes first. I gave them to Isa. Or in the other example, we bought it for them. We bought it. So the direct object is a pronoun. We bought it for them. We bought it for them. So when we've got a pronoun, like in the previous example or in the second, we always put the DO, the direct object first, and then the indirect object at the end. I gave them to Isa, or we bought it for them. This is the indirect or indirect object or object. Okay, moving on to section B. Some verbs can be used with either for or to. Often there's a difference in meaning. To suggests to suggests that there's a transfer of something to someone. There's a transfer from of something to someone. And for suggests that someone benefits from something. So we're talking about the difference of for and to. To suggests that there's a transfer of something to someone, and for suggests that someone benefits from something. Compare. I hadn't got time to visit Mira, so I wrote a letter to her. So notice that there's a transfer. I hadn't got time to Mira. I hadn't got time to visit Mira, so I wrote a letter to her. So there's a transfer. I wrote a letter to her. There's a transfer. So we use it to or to. Another example, Mira had broken her wrist. Mira had broken her wrist. So I wrote a letter for her. So I made her a favor. So I wrote a letter for her. There's no transfer here. I've just made her a favor because she'd broken her wrist. That pattern is also used with the following verbs, which I'm gonna read, so just so you know how to pronounce the verbs, remembering that it's always important to use those verbs inside the sentences. We've got here the verbs to bring, leave, pay, play, post, read, sell, send, sing, and take. Moving on. Sometimes, however, the meaning is very similar. For example, he played the piece to me, or he played the piece for me. He played the piece to me, or he played the piece for me. Another example, can you sing that song again to us? Or can you sing that song again for us? Can you sing what? That song. Can you sing that song again for us? Or can you sing that song again for us? It doesn't make a difference in those cases. Moving on. Note that when object plus object is used after these verbs, it usually has a similar meaning to the verb with object plus to plus object. For example, I sold him the car. You sold him what? The car. You sold the car to whom? To him. I sold him the car. It means I sold the car to him. There's a transfer of property. It doesn't mean I sold the car for him. For example, I sold the car for a friend of mine. I made the business thing. It's different. When we say I sold him the car, that means that I made him a transfer of property. It's different from I sold the car for him, meaning that I've made him a business sort of a thing, kind of a thing. Okay, moving on to section C. Some verbs that are followed by two objects cannot have their objectives reversed with for or to. For example, we all envied him his lifestyle. We all envied him his lifestyle. But not we all envied him his. We all envied his lifestyle for him, or we all envied his lifestyle to him. No, it's incorrect. But pay attention to the correct form. We all envied his lifestyle. Those kind of verbs, or that kind of pattern might be used with the following verbs: to allow, to ask, to cost, to deny, to forgive, to guarantee, to permit, and to refuse. Okay, moving on. Section D. Some verbs, such as describe and fix, can only have a second object if this is a prepositional object. For example, with to. Compare. She described the situation to me. She described what? She described the situation to me. She described the situation to me. She described it to me what? The situation. The situation is the direct object. She described this, the situation, direct object to me, indirect object. So basically that's what we've got. We've got the personal pronoun, the person, the verb, the direct object, and the indirect object. Another example. She told this joke to me. She told this joke, direct object. She told this joke to me, indirect object. Or she told me, she, indirect object, this joke, direct object. Again, I'd like to emphasize it's all about the sentence. We've got always the direct object and the indirect object. She told me this joke, or she told this joke to me. Both ways are possible. We also apply that pattern with the verbs to admit, announce, demonstrate, explain, introduce, mention, point out. Notice how we pronounce that verb, that phrasal verb. Not point out, but point out, point out. This is connected to speech, right? Prove, report, say, and suggest. We also use that pattern, but kind of differently, with for. Compare. He fixed the top for me. He fixed the top for me. He made me a favor. He fixed the top for me. Another example, I booked a room for her, or I booked her a room. I booked a room for her, or I booked her a room. I booked a room. This is the direct object, and it needs an indirect object for her. Or I booked her, indirect object, a thing. I booked her a room, direct object. That pattern can also be used with the verbs to collect, mend, and repair. That's it for today. We've just finished that lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have to say it's really important to understand the relation between subjects, verbs, objects being direct objects or indirect objects. Basically, that's the fundamental structure of a sentence in terms of how you can express your ideas in English. Please, I'd like to remind you to subscribe if you enjoyed it, if it's been useful for you. Subscribe to the channel to help English learners all over the world. I intended to read 100 units, which is all about that series where we're gonna be discussing, we're gonna be addressing all of the issues that are important to develop your fluency, your sophistication, your proficiency in English. I really believe, and it's been proved, that through that method we learn, at the same time we learn grammar, but not critical things, but grammar in terms of what is important, and at the same time we're learning vocabulary, we're learning connected speech, assimilation, intrusive are all of those things through that method where we read aloud things and explain at the same time, making sort of conversation at the same time. That's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Cheers.